So let me ask you a question. What if you have a half a kazayas of matzah? Is there any to eat it since you can't eat a full kazayas anyway? Or what if you're better? What if you have one kazayas of matzah, but you have to share it? So you have a half a kazayas and your friend has a half a kazayas. What should you do? Should one guy give the other guy his kazayas? Or should each guy eat their half a kazayas?
So Muttel Grubner was famous for saying, in the Heimat God ein Matze für 10 Menschen, in du 10 Matzes für ein Mensch ist nicht hakazai, it's nicht genieg.
It's big. I remember hearing a story about someone in the war. They had one kazayas of matzah, and the one person, the older one, asked the younger one, "Let me have it. I'm older. Let me chaperein the last mitzvah. The last mitzvah you're going to live. You'll probably have more opportunity." I remember the story. It's an interesting story. Okay. Zok the Heilige Mist. Torah Bakal. The coin wasn't just supposed to gently stick his hand into the box and take out the two gorillas. Rather, he had to do it with a snatch. Rashi says, Torah Pisoin, the trefo v'chaticha. He had to snatch it and chop it. The hellish gorillas. The reason why everything has to be done quickly is we don't want him to be able to fix it. He has to be able to, we have to be sure that it's being completely random, or random means controlled by the running flow. Echad kosav alav l'shem. One of these gorillas that said l'shem on it. Echad kosav alav l'shem. Haskan b'mi. He had the gabe on his right side. Rosh b'shav and the Rosh Kul mismoilai on his left side. Im shel shem olav b'yaminai. If the goyal that says l'shem on it came up in his right hand, which is the way we want to see it, it's because you're makar of mitzvahs b'yaminai. And the Shir Lazazel is referred to as smoil, and it takes our Averis down the peak. So then, if that happens, Haskan Oimerloi, the Skan says, Ishi Kohen Gadol, my master the Kohen Gadol, Hag beYamincha, raise up your right hand. I guess everyone could see the Lashem. Him shall Shem Allah b'smoiloi, and if Shal Shem came up in his left hand. In Rosh Beis Av, Omerloi, Ishi Kohen Gadol, Hag b'smoilach. Pick up your left hand. Nosnon al Shnei Asirim. Then you put the right one on the right seer, the left one on the left seer. The Omer Lashem Chatos. And he says Lashem Chatos. Rabbi Shmuel Omer Loiha Yitzarech Loimer Chatos. Didn't have to say the word Chatos at all. Elo Lashem. He just had to say Lashem to identify, to designate the seir, that's Lashem. Now, since he says Hashem's name, once again, the Hein Einin Acharav, and the Tzibur answers after him, for Hashem Kavod Malchusei Loylam Vod. Practically, Lomali Torah Makalpi. Why does it have to be done in such a way where it's like snatching it, not just slowly selecting? So that there's no way he could even try to feel, maybe he could tell, since the letters were sort of engraved in the goyrel, wasn't just printed on. So there's some texture there. So with enough time, he might even be able to feel which one was Lashem and then select that one. If he did it very quickly, clearly there wouldn't have been time to do that. Amarava, Kalbi Shal Eitzaya, the box was made out of wood. Mishel Chol Haisa, and it was also Choil, it wasn't Miskadeshes, it wasn't Mikudeshes, it wasn't part of the Beis HaMikdash's property. The Eina Machzekas Elosh Teyadayim. And it wasn't a big box. It was a small box that the maximum hands that can fit into it would be two. Zogt Gemara, Maskav Lorbi. Bishloma Eina Machzekas Elosh Teyadayim. I understand the reason why the box was a small box. If there's a lot of room to move his hand around, he could feel the different sides of the goyal. If it's very small, all he could really do is pull it out. Elashal choil, why does the box have to be choil? Why can't it belong to the Beis HaMikdash? Mikdasha. if they made a wooden box kodesh, so now you have a box of kodesh, a klisharis, that's wood. Klisharis the eighth loyavdina. And it's not appropriate to make a klisharis out of eights because it's not bakovidik. The klisharis has to be of a precious metal. So why not? So v'nav to the kesef, v'nav to the zav. So Taka make it gold, Taka make it silver. The Torah chasa al mamonon shel Yisrael. The Torah is chasa al mamonon shel Yisrael. So thank you, Chaim Tzvi, for saying what? Because you're asked, what do you mean Torah chasa al mamonon shel Yisrael? We find many times that ein aniyas b'makam ashiris. To the contrary, everything has to be first class when it comes to the Beis Hamikdash. Oh,
the Aron was made out of wood.
Well, but it's covered with gold.
So cover this box with gold.
Right. So the lots of Gemara is asking, why don't you upgrade it a little bit? Not fully gold, but cover it with gold. Something, put some gold on it. Why leave it as new wood? So the Mefarshim say that when do you say there's no aniyas for makam ashiris? That's something that's used regularly. This was really only used once a year. Since they only used it once a year, there it would make sense to say chasam aman shel Yisrael. Another thing the Mefarshim say is, when you say Torah chasam aman shel Yisrael, that's when you're referring to communal money. Communal money has to be kept carefully and used sparingly. But if it's an individual giving it, to answer Chaim Tzvi's point, Munbaz and Hilni, that an individual can be as generous as he wants with his own funds. But to impose it on the rabbin, that's not done.
What about the begadim of the Kohen Gadol that was worn on Yom Kippur?
So those really weren't so expensive unless an individual wanted to upgrade.
The base cost, I thought even the basic ones were quite expensive.
We learned there are 30 money, and 30 money is a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
So
They're going to be worn once. This is going to be used every year.
I hear. And that's really only used once because it's put away after. I guess my idea of spending a lot of money, even when you say chasamam, even chasamam, what level that is. Maybe that 30 money is still not too much. The gold would be even more.
Gold box? Gold box?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not talking about a huge.
You know how much an ounce of gold is these days? I don't know.
1,700 US.
18.
All the kalim in the Beit Hamikdash, all the stuff is made out of gold. There's so much gold in the Beit Hamikdash. All of a sudden we're concerned about.
But that was used all the time. We're talking about a one-time deal. So if that's why Avik is asking goods. Avik is asking from the big Lovin, which will never done only once a year. It's only one avoid it and then it's put away forever. How you talking? So it would make more geschmack according to what Avik is asking. If you learn that the big day Lovin were able to be used for a kohen hedyet all year, then it's not so fair. But if it was used only one time and it's some communal funds, why don't you say Torah chasa amamun shel over there as well? It's a good trial.
Yossi, if I can go back to the Mishnah for a minute, the term taraf really means torn. Taraf Yosef and treifa is torn. Doesn't mean snatched. How do you have?
I'm just going to actually taraf pisaim the treifa v'chatifa. I guess when an animal, predator, is taraf an animal, when he snatches it very, very abruptly, very, very quickly. So it's probably not focusing on the actual treif of it as much as it's focusing on the way it's done. It's grabbed suddenly. Also, when an animal grabs another animal, it's not killing it right away. It's grabbing it first. It's snatching it. Right,
but the term is used after Yaakov saw the bloody Ksenes Apostle. That's when he said Torah Yosef. And in the term terefa, it also means torn. The lungs are torn, right? It doesn't even mean it's snatched. So I'm just, it's a curious.
How does the Art Scroll define the word Torah?
Yeah, it's snatched.
Yeah, it says the word snatch.
Right. So no, and the Torah has a different use, different definition.
It's not just taking it; it's killing it too. I hear. It's a good art. Okay, so let's see the Gemara. Masnisin the loy haitan. Our Mishnah would be inconsistent with the following Tana that we're going to quote. The Tanya. So let's just review. Our Mishnah says that the Kohen lifted up the girdle that was in his right hand and in his left hand. He took them both out of the box. We're going to find a Tana that says that the Kohen only took one of these girdles out of the box. The Tanya of Yehuda, I remember Shema Belezer, Askan. I'm sorry, Rav Yehuda Shema Belezer, comma. Askan, the Kohen Gadol, Machnisin Yodin Bakalpi. The Skan and the Kohen Gadol both put their hands into this box. So David the is telling us that Stanzals teaches Torah as mixing the lots, which is very interesting because it seems from the Gemara that we wanted the box to be so small that you can't even get your hands in there to manipulate them. All you can do is just take it out. So it's interesting. It's interesting that Stanzal teaches it as mixing. Okay, so Zok to Gemara. So the Skan and the Kohen Gadol stuck their hands in. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen here. The Kalpi. So, and they each used only the right hand. So if the Lashem turns up in the right hand of the Kohen Gadol, and that Skan, the Skan will proclaim, Ishi Kohen Gadol, Hag b'yamincha, lift up your hand. And if it's in the right hand of the Skan, the Lashem shows up, Rosh Beisav Omer Lo the Kohen Gadol Daber Milach. The Rosh Beisav tells the Kohen Gadol, say what you got to say. Zok to Gemara, why couldn't you just do it the same way? So I just want to pop into Rashi for a second. When the Rosh Beisav told the Kohen Gadol, Daber Milach, say your thing, what it means is, Daber Devorach, Rashi says, say Lashem Chatas. So for the Gemara, why do they have to change protocol? When the girl of Lashem showed up in the right hand of the Skan, the name of the Skan, why doesn't the Skan just say? When the Kohen Gadol picked it up, when it ended up in the right hand of the Kohen Gadol will say, he will say Hag b'yaminach. The Skan will tell the Kohen Hag b'yaminach. So why doesn't the Skan say Hag b'yaminach, or he should lift up his own hand? So to Markivin de Lashalak b'yodei, since the Lashem Goyel did not show up in the hands of the Kohen Gadol, Chol Shadaite, it'll make the Kohen feel bad. That's what the Rosh Beisav said. So Rashi Kivin de Lashalak b'yodei the Kohen Gadol, rather uviyodei the Skan Solik, Chol Shadaite the Kohen Gadol. It'll make the Kohen Gadol feel bad that on his watch it didn't show up. It didn't show up. The Lashem Goyel did not show up in his right hand. He omer lo Skan if the Skan would tell him. That's why they changed protocol and they had the Rosh Beisav tell the Skan to lift up his hand. But my commitment, we have a machlokes here, whether the Kohen Gadol stuck in both his right and his left hand and took one girdle on his right and one girdle on his left, which is what our Mishnah says, or you have this new brisa from Rabbi Yehuda that says that the Kohen Gadol only stuck his right hand in and the Skan stuck his right hand in. So tomorrow, Mar Shavar, Yamina the Skan, Adif Mismoli the Kohen Gadol. Rabbi Yehuda held that the right hand of the Skan is better than using the left hand of the Kohen Gadol. And the other Mandamar hold that the left hand of the Kohen Gadol is just as good as the right hand as the Skan, and therefore we might as well stick to the Kohen Gadol's hands. Uman Hai Tana, the Polag Alei Rabbi Yehuda, who is the Tana of our Mishnah, who argues on Rabbi Yehuda, and who holds that it was the Kohen's both hands that were used. So tomorrow, the Tanya, it's interesting, he was the Skan, and he learned that the Skan does not use his hand. The Tanya we learned, why did you have the Skan always in his right hand, on the right side of the Kohen Gadol? When Rashi teaches it, that's Rashi's first shot in what the question is. Why was the Skan always at the right side of the Kohen Gadol? And Rashi says, I heard a different shot, and I heard Rashi, Lama Skan Mamuna. Why b'chalal was there ever a Skan? Why do you need a Skan for? Shem Yer Babso. just because I'm here by psal, I will close man shaloya by psal, ain't as can oivet shum avoid the boiler. But before there's a psal, skan doesn't do any void. The Zok to Gemara, Lama skan, miminoi. Why was the skan there on his right side? Shem ir by psal b'koyin gadol, nichna skan and mishamish tachta. The skan would go right away and take over the avoida. So according to Rashi, we're explaining either why b'chal there's a skan, or why was the skan always at the right side of the kohen gadol, so that he should be ready to slide into position the moment the kohen gadol has something that's a psul. But of course, he doesn't stand behind him like we learned yesterday, because then it's like it's looking like the skan is trying to displace the kohen gadol. Taner Rabban, Arbaim Shana. This is the Gemara that Chaim quoted yesterday. Arbaim Shana Sheshima Shimon Atzadik. The 40 years, and this was the second base of Mikdash, that Shimon Atzadik was Mishamish. Now Shimon Atzadik is at the epicenter of today's current events, because the Hamas is blaming, of course it's nonsense, but Hamas is blaming the current hostilities because in the Shimon Atzadik neighborhood, they're trying to evict people who didn't pay rent. So Tanu Rabban, Arbaim Shamash Shima Shimon Atzadik, the 40 years that Shimon Atzadik served, they were zoicha that the goyrel always showed up in the right hand of the Kohen Gadol. The Kan Veilach, after that, towards the end of the second Beis Hamikdash, where things weren't so well anymore, the Kohanim Gedolim weren't necessarily royal akach. Pamim oila b'yamin, pamim oila b'smal. It was hit or miss. During the life of Shimon Atzadik, the lashon shel zahuris, the white or the red wool. What red wool? Of Rashi, tzemer sorok. It was combed wool, umoshach and stretched. Came in lashon like in the shape of a tongue, and that's why the bundle of wool was called lashon, as tongue. The tzavua edaim, and it's dyed red. The koishrin oisay b'rosh she'ir mishtalech. They would tie it on the head of the Sira Mishalech, and as the Sira Mishalech was falling down the mountain, it became white. Who's Simon? That was an indication that your Rebbeinu Shalom was Meichel Klal Yisrael. Shenemar im yuchat eichem kashanim kashela galbinu. And I believe they also took some of this wool and hung it up in the Beis Hamikdash itself, because the tzibur doesn't see the nace of the red turning white. Only the one person who goes out with the Sira Mishalech. So they actually had a satellite screen where they were able to have the wool hanging in the Beis Hamikdash as well, so everyone saw that. It was again hit and miss. Sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't. There's a famous story with the Panovich Rav, the Rabbi Lowy once said over by Shabbat Shuvah. The story went that the Panovich Rav found himself one day in South America, and there were posters hanging on the street lampposts and the electricity towers that said there's going to be a public debate between Orthodox Judaism and Reform Judaism, and there was an open debate. Everybody was welcome to come. So he decided, the Panovich Rav, that he wanted to be at this event. So he shows up to the event. There's an Orthodox rabbi on stage that's debating with a Reform rabbi, and there's blows back and forth. And of course, the emes always wins. So the Orthodox rabbi had the Reform rabbi on the ropes. He had him almost knocked out, until the Reform rabbi pops up and says, "Rabbi, you consider yourself Orthodox?" I said, "Sure." So why is it that I saw you drive to McDonald's last week and then go inside and have something to eat? And I saw you last Shabbos driving to McDonald's and going in and eating treif. The rabbi turned red like a tomato. He became speechless. And then the Reform rabbi, after that knockout punch, tells the rabbi, Elamai, you don't believe it either. Your whole religious dogma is nonsense. You just use it to try to be superior to us. But the whole thing is a fake, a phony, and a fraud. And it was a knockout. So the Panovich Rav stood up and says, is it okay if I say something. So they said, sure, this is an open debate. We want to hear everyone's ideas. So the Panovich Rav comes up to the stage and he turns to the Reform rabbi and he asks him, do you eat in McDonald's? And the rabbi says, of course I eat in McDonald's and I'm proud of it. I'm not going to subject myself to those antiquated, nonsensical, fanatical rules. And how about Shabbos? You keep Shabbos or do you drive on Shabbos? He says that I proudly drive my Bentley down the street Shabbos because I want to enjoy the Shabbat. And I don't believe in that ancient nonsense fanatical dogma of not driving. So the Panovich Rav said, so in fact we see a distinct difference between the Orthodox rabbi and the Reform rabbi. Because it says in the Torah, if your averis make you red from embarrassment, then kashalak yalbinu. Then I'll be moichel you. If they make your face red again from embarrassment, then Chatzemer Yalbinu, you'll have a full mechila. So the Panovich Rav ended off by saying, sure, we do Averis. We do a lot of Averis, but we're embarrassed by them. We're bothered by them. Hashem will forgive us. But you who take pride in your Averis, you will never have any hope. Zok Gemara, Ner Maravi Dalek, the Ner Maravi would stay lit. And Rashi tells us that there's two versions of what the Ner Maravi was. Because in fact, there's a Shaila, how was the menorah positioned in the Heichal? Was it positioned from east to west? If it was positioned from east to west, then the first Ner that you would hit would be closest to the east, and the last Ner that you would hit would be closest to the west, because the menorah was from east to west. If that was the way the menorah was positioned, then the Ner Maravi is the second from the east. So when you walk in, it's the second one you hit. The first one you hit, you can't call Ner Maravi because it's all the way to the east. So the second one was called the Ner Maravi. But there's another shita who holds that the menorah was positioned north-south. If that's the case, then all of the lamps were equally positioned as far as east and west is concerned. They were all in a line. And according to the Abshat, the Ner Maravi was the center Ner, which pointed towards the base Kodesh HaKodeshim. They set it up so it should point that way, and all the other Ners were pointed to the center. So the Ner Maravi would stay lit all the time. After Shimon HaTzadik's days, sometimes it stayed lit, and sometimes it went out. The other nays that happened in Shimon HaTzadik's times, by Eish al-Maracha Miskaber, the Eish on the Maracha continued to burn. We know, we learned that there were Shnei Gzirei Eitzim placed on the Mizbeach in the morning, and then there were two more Gzirei Eitzim that were carried by two Kohanim that were placed in the afternoon. And that was always enough to burn all their Kabbanas, no matter what. But their Chneis, the flame was always burning robust. But Mikan Ve'elach, once Shimon HaTzadik wasn't around, sometimes there would be enough wood and the flame would burn. Sometimes they needed to bring more wood. The Kohanim didn't refrain. They had to constantly add wood to the fire.
Throughout the second day from English, it's not that there were no nisim when Shimon HaTzadik was not around. Sometimes there were nisim when the Yidden was there, sometimes they weren't.
Right, so I was wondering what this meant. Does that mean for the rule of certain Kohanim Gedolim it worked and certain times it didn't? Or does it mean even in one Kohen Gadol, one day it worked and one day it didn't? So I wasn't sure what they meant. So when it did, it was an ace. Right? So maybe some Kohanim Gedolim, if they were good boys that day, so the ace happened, and if they were not good boys that day, they didn't happen. I hear. So the new on the time, Pam means Pam during a period where they had a Kohen Gadol, they had an Easter, and not no. Okay. And there was a special bracha in the Omer and the Shtei Alechem that they satisfied even with a small amount, and there was enough for everybody. And every kohen that got a kazayis So right away there was an abundance that each coin was even able to get a kazayis. Yesh oichloi b'saveya. Some people ate it and they were fully satisfied. Yesh oichloi moiser. And some people were so satisfied that they couldn't even eat the whole kazayis. There was even leftovers. But mikan ve'elach. Once the tzitkas dropped off, nishtachem e'era ba'omer. And Rashi said, "Eina masbia." It was no longer satisfying people. And nishtachem e'era ba'omer u'v'shtei alechem u'v'lechem apanim. And now the chalkoin magi kapul. So it seems that there are two issues. A is not everybody got so much anymore, and B, it didn't satisfy them. The chalkoin magi kapul. She'eina kazayis. They didn't get a kazayis. And we'll continue Rashi later. The tznu and the people who didn't want to fight didn't even bother taking it. And the gargarin would grab and take. Now let's see Rashi. Since they saw anyway that it doesn't satisfy them, the tznu wouldn't take. There's a lot of extra they took, but if they see there wasn't enough, they didn't take. But in the days of Shimon, even if you only had a small share of a pool, you would still take it anyway. Let's see what the Toshis Shonim says. Shemagia kapul, atznun moishkin yedayim. Oimer Rebbe, the davka magia kapul. The only time that tznun wouldn't eat is if he only got a pull, a small bean. Avol bekazayis, but if they were able to get a kazayis, loy hayu moishkin yedayim, then they would never refrain from taking. Kidimu lekayim mitzvahs achila. They wanted a mekayim the mitzvahs achila, and with a kazayis, you're mekayim the mitzvah of achila. Avol kan, but if they only got a kapul, which is not a shir achila, loy hayu mitzvahs achila legamri. They didn't have a mitzvahs achila. Kivin she'ein sham el kapul. We know a shir achila is with a kazayis. And so therefore they didn't bother taking. In time effect, the Toshis Shoshanim. Heichad magi and kapul svein. Can you remember his psachim? Even if they were svein, eich mikayim or mitzvahs achila. How are they mikayim or mitzvahs achila if they only ate less than a kazayis? Yishloimar leiboy kazayis legamri. You don't really need a kazayis. Ella kazayis adif v'chashav achila. So this is a little bit of fuzzy logic. You don't really need a kazayis or a chila, but you better to have a kazayis and still kasha a chila. It's a little fuzzy. Well, let me just finish. They weren't able to give everybody the equal amount. I guess we just broke off pieces. So
generally today, the Chachamim told us that a kazayis makes somebody full, but with the lechem aponim, the Gemara speaks out specifically that they were zat, that they were satisfied.
Well, that was before the times of that was during the time of Shimon HaTzadik, but afterward not. So we're discussing after the times of Shimon HaTzadik. It's new and didn't eat unless they got a kazayis.
And the reason why they didn't eat is because they weren't satisfied with it.
If they were satisfied, they would have eaten even less. But but now that they're not satisfied, they'll only eat the mekayim the mitzvahs achila. And the mitzvahs achila, they're only mekayim with kazayis.
So they wouldn't eat because they wouldn't be satisfied and they didn't have the mitzvahs achila.
Right? But on that, the Toshis Shalom said that it's mashma that they would have eaten if they were satisfied. I wasn't a mitzvah; they don't time eat.
Oh, there is a mitzvah.
Only, but they get a kazayis. It's the Toshis Shalom says that they even if they didn't get a kazayis, but if they would be seveya, they would have eaten. The question is why. So he says a little bit of fuzzy logic. A boy kazayis lagamri ela kazayis adif v'chashiva achila. So the Brisker Rav explains that there's a difference between a mitzvah's achilas matzah and a mitzvah's achilas of kachim. The mitzvah's achilas matzah is you have a chiyuv to eat a kazayis. You have a chiyuv to do an achila, so you have to eat a kazayis. But the mitzvah's achilas kachim, the mitzvah is that the kachim should be eaten. It's covered for the kachim. So therefore, sure, it's better if you eat a kazayis and you're doing an achila, but there's still a mitzvah because this way the kachim gets eaten. It's a very interesting, it's a very nishmaka distinction. But that's where the shaila comes in, is are you supposed to try to eat even though it's only a half? And the post can say, if you have a half and someone else has a half of kazayis matzah, you should eat your half and he's eating his half, and you shouldn't give away your half. At least you have some. But there are those who learn that the best way to do it is to make a gyro of who gets both halves. And this way, you're doing a ma'aseh that demonstrates that you have a chukah to do the whole mitzvah. And B, if you don't win the girl, you don't win the girl, but at least one of you gets to eat the full kazayis. It's not like which one? That's right, because the Bishkovs, no, because the Bishkov holds you would have to be a kazayis to be a shir achila. Yeah.
This would also say that for mitzvah achila, you don't need a kazayis. Oh, but that's only the question.
But like David Zolti said earlier, what a kazayis is has changed. Right? And the Alter Haim, ein Matze gedig verzeihn kazayis. Han sein Matze nicht kein kazayis. Zok the hele Gemara weiter. So once there was a story, there was once a fellow, shenot al chelak chalkoi v'chelak chaveroi. He chapped his chelak and he chapped his friend's chelak. And they didn't take well to him because that's a chazer. But Ben Chamton. They called him a Ben Chamton ad Yom Moshe. Till the day he died, they called him a Ben Chamton. Tosfos has a very interesting point. Tosfos asks, the Kari Yosef Ben Chamton, for Tosfos, Apapi, Shagam Garganin Acherim, it's clear from the Gemara that everybody who took was a Gargarin. So what's up is he was the guy who was known as the Fresser. Dr. Gemara, Hi the Kara Isai Chamton, Feimar Chrini, Yesh Leimer, because Lefishu Chotav Mecham Tenacher. He chapped from another Chamton. Inami Acherim like Bidu, Kishoy Chotin Zamisa. It's new in their Moshkin Shadim, they didn't mind giving it away. Avozeh, Kishozeh Chotav Miyada Hikbit. But he chapped from another Chamton. Other Chamton wants. So if you take from somebody who wants, then you're called a Ganer. If you take from somebody who doesn't want, so if you steal from a timid guy, okay, you can get away with it. But if you steal from a chazer, you're going to get beaten up. And he picked the wrong guy to start up with. Now what? Right?
Remember? Asher.
Yishka was Eshchever, you mean? Yikach?
Gina.
Why was he Zoiche? Because he did it himself. Very good, very good. Yeah. Gesagt Gemara weiter. Amar Rabba Barshila, my cross, just in the pasuk. Where do you find that Chamton is considered a ganem? Where do you get that wording from Chamton? So it says like Kai, Paltain Yad Rasha, save me from the hand of a Rasha, Mikaf Ma'avel b'choimit. I'm someone who does avelus, and he's a choimit, which means he steals me. Rabba Mehacha, Limdu Heitev, learn good, Yishu Mishpat, learn halachas, Ishru Chamoitz, and make sure to strengthen to help one who was stolen from. Ashrei Chamoitz, you should help strengthen one who's a victim of a crime of theft. But absolutely don't glorify the thief. The year Shimon HaTzadik died, this is already the Kabbalah Shem Tov story. Amrullah, he told them, the Shana Zu Umeis. He said that he's going to die, in other words, referring to himself. He says, this year, I'm not going to live. I'm not going to survive. Amrullah, they told him, how do you know that you're going to die? Amrullah, I'll tell you why. Every Yom Kippur, someone would meet me who was dressed in white clothing, and wrapped around with a talus of white. He would come in with me, I assume, to the Beis Kodesh HaKodeshim. The Yotzaim would come out with me. Nicholas and me came in with me, and he didn't come out with me. Achar Regel, right after Yom Tov, after Sukkot Chala Shivas Yomim, he became sick for 7 days. Umeis, and then he died. And after he died, the Nimnu Echav HaKayanim Milavorich B'Shem. And Rashi says they stopped using the Shema Meforish by Bikas Kayanim, so how you could die. They weren't royal Lakach, so they just used the name Adnas. So the Shaila is, it says that when the Kohen Gadol goes into the Beis Kodesh HaKodeshim, no one is supposed to go with him. There's a pasuk that says so. It says, no one else should go b'voya l'kodesh. No one is supposed to go with him. And it's brought down in the Gemara, even a malach may not go with him. So who was this? Who was there with him? No one's allowed to go. So there's different pshat. There's one pshat that says that when did this happen? Not when he went in to do the avodah. This occurred when he went in to take out the kaf and the machta. It could be over there. Someone is allowed to go with him. And then you would learn that it was a malach. Although there are those who learned that it was the Rabbanu Shalom. That was the sin. Tanu Rabban. Arbaim Shana Kaidim Chorban Abayis. 40 years before the Chorban Abayis, Loi Haya Goyrel Oil B'Yimim. No longer, things were deteriorating quickly, and the Goyrel did not come out in the right hand of the Kohen Gadol. Not a good sign. Loi Haya Los Mishal Zahuris Malvin. The red wool didn't become white. Once again, not a good sign. You imagine we go home, everybody's in Kippur, and you always feel good, right? Everyone feels good. You feel invigorated. What's Yom Kippur? You feel clean, and then you do the Kiddush Lavana, it's Gavaltic. Can you imagine them at the end of Yom Kippur and it was still red? They probably felt very icky. You know, my Rabbi didn't stay lit. And this is the scary thing. The doors of the Heichel would open on their own. And Rashi says, Simin la'oivim lavi l'kanais. It would be signaling, almost beckoning to the enemy to come take me over. And there are those who learn that is referring to our mouths. It was open because our mouths were open and we spoke too much Lashon Hara. And that's what brought to the Churban.
I'm reading the article. Mashal says that the doors open so that the Rishon should not be able to claim that they were the ones who conquered.
You were let in. You were let in. Very nice. At Shigor Behen Yabichem and Zakir. Yabichem and Zakir scolded the doors. Amar Loi, Heichel, Heichel. Why are you scaring yourself or damaging yourself? I know you're going to be destroyed. Already said Nevi'is about you that Pasach Levavan Dalsecha. Levanon is the word that the Navi uses to describe the Beis Hamikdash, to refer to the Beis Hamikdash. The Gemara will soon explain why. Pesach Levanon Dalsecha. Levanon, open your doors. The Soichel Eish Barzecha, and fire will eat your cedar beams. Why was the Beis Hamikdash called Levanon? Shemalbin Avoneseim Shel Yisrael. Because the Beis Hamikdash cleaned and whitened the Aveiros of Klal Yisrael. Amar Rav Zutra Bar Tovia, Lama Nikra Shema Yar. Why is the Beis Hamikdash also referred to as a Yar, the forest of Lebanon? Dichsiv Beis Yar HaLevanon. Learn Malach to teach you, Ma Yar Malavle, just like a forest grows, there's a lot of vegetation growing. Af Beis Hamikdash Malavle. And the Mefarshim say, I think Avineza says, Malavle, just like listen, Leiv. The Beis Hamikdash wants the hearts of Klal Yisrael. Rebbeinu Shalom is not interested in our karbanis. He's interested in our hearts. Where do you see that the Beis Hamikdash grew? It wasn't a plant sanctuary. When Shlomo HaMelech built the Beis Hamikdash, Notabai Kalmini Migadim Shalzov, he planted delicious sweet pears out of gold. For you might see pears bismanean. And on the regular seasons, as a regular tree would, this golden tree would put out pears. Now, golden pears are metal. If they bang together, it sounds like a gragger almost. Whenever there was a breeze, the pears would bang together and it would make a racket. Its pears should make noise just like the pears in the Beis Hamikdash make noise. And the Kohanim had parnasa from the golden trees. Who said money doesn't grow on trees? And when the Goyim came in to desecrate the Heichel Yavshu, they dried out. Shenemar uperach Levanon umlal, and the growth of Levanon and the Beis Hamikdash umlal became rotted out. What is the article attached to the word umlal? What's the definition of umlal? devastated. But also the Kadosh Baruch Hu lachsir lanu, the Rebbeinu Shalom will eventually give it back to us. Shenemar parayach tifrach v'sogel, it'll grow again and we'll be happy. Afgilas v'ranan kvoid hal navono nitimah. Kavod hal navono will be given back to you. So in fact, we're going to have it eventually. Eventually, money will grow on trees. It's not yet. Nothing else here. 10 times the Kohen Gadol mentioned the Shema Meforish on Yom Kippur. Gimel B'Vida Rishon, and Rashi lists off the 3 times, and Rashi says the 3 times are Shel Par Ona Hashem Katosi Ona Hashem Kaper and then Lefnei Hashem Ketorah. So the 3 times he said the Shem Hashem. Ushloisha B'Vida Sheni, Ushloisha B'Sir Mishalayach. That's 9. The Echad B'Gerolish, when he said Zat Hashem Chatos, so that was also Hashem Meforish. So 10 times. Ukvar Omer Hashem, Ukvar Omer, we already said Hashem v'nishba koil b'richa. We already said earlier that the voice of the Kohen Gadol is so strong that even though he said the Shema Meforish in the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, it was heard b'yericha. And this shayla is what this means. The one shot is, since it wasn't the Kohen Gadol speaking, it was the Rebbeinu Shalom speaking from the Kohen Gadol's mouth. That's why it was such a strong voice. But there are those who learn that the noise that they heard was Klal Yisrael responding. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Elol Avad. Rabbi Bechana, Mishalayim Lericha Asara Parsois. It's 10 parsois. The tzir the losses of Heichel, and the hinges of the Heichel, when they opened the door, Nishma was able to be heard. Bishmoynet Chume, 8 Chumen, which is 2,000 times 8 is 16,000 Amish. You were able to hear the Dalsas of Heichel. Somebody desperately needs WD-40. Zok to Gemara. Bishmoynet Chume Shabbos. Zok to Gemara. You see, they didn't have WD-40. Would have been very popular in the Beis HaMikdash's time. Zok to Gemara.
There was plenty of grease in the Beis HaMikdash. I don't understand.
You don't know why they couldn't come up with grease.
Yeah.
The Rav spoke when the Rav spoke by the Ne'ilas Achag. He said that there was his roommate. His mother used to make him delicious cookies, but she used schmaltz, so his cookies were fleishiks. Izim, goats that are in Yericha, Misatchosh would sneeze, from the smell of the ketores that came all the way from Yerushalayim. Women in Yericha didn't have to put on perfume on the Reich ketores. Kalash Yerushalayim, a kala in Yerushalayim itself, she didn't have to put on perfume. But once again, the Reich ketores because it was so strong in Yerushalayim. Amr b'Yosef deploy Izim Hayul Abba. My father had goats. I don't know how far this was from Yerushalayim. They would regularly sneeze. An elderly Zaken once told me, I once went to Mishkan Shiloi, which was already out of operation for many hundreds of years. The Reich Ketars was so absorbed into the walls of the Mishkan Shiloi, I was still able to smell the Ketars. You have to lift it up, but placing it on the animal itself, you don't even have to lift it up. In other words, Rashi says the whole goyrel is not makkah. The goyrel is not makkah. That's how you're supposed to do it. But if he didn't do it, the karbanis will be kosher. Zok to Gemara. Let's stop here. Let's get this into a new sugya. We'll be mamshich here tomorrow. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. We should all be zoche to see money growing on trees.
Amen. Doesn't
Amen.